been hit so badly. Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much?
Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes. And now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Hello everyone, I'm Zain Asher. You are watching CNN Newsroom live from New York. Tonight, warnings from the UN and Ukraine about food shortages caused by Russia's war. And we look ahead to the first televised hearing of the investigation into the riots at the US Capitol and the controversial decision to deport migrants from the UK to Rwanda. We're in Kigali to find out more. We begin with dire warnings about the consequences of Russia's war on one of the biggest grain exporters in the world. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the international famine is a very real threat, warning that hundreds of people could starve if Russia continues blocking Ukraine's Black Sea ports. Even if the blockade is lifted, Ukraine says next year's harvest could be reduced by almost half because of the loss of arable land. The UN Secretary General says the crisis could unleash an unprecedented wave of hunger and destitution, as well as economic chaos. CNN's Claire Sebastian has more.
Just a day after talks between Russia and Turkey seemed to lay the groundwork for at least some kind of negotiation, perhaps even just on a temporary solution to the problems of Ukraine's grain exports, more and more obstacles now seem to be getting in the way of that. One is that Russia may already be putting in place deals to sell Ukrainian grain from occupied areas. On Wednesday, the head of the Russian military administration in occupied parts of Ukraine's Zaporizhia region said the first rail shipment of grain had departed the town of Melitopol for Crimea to be loaded onto ships to Turkey and the Middle East. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said no agreements had been signed yet with Turkey or the Middle East, but work was underway. Ukraine, meanwhile, is accusing Russia of stealing grain to sell for its own gain. This is what the country's deputy agrarian minister told CNN's Julia Chatterley.
Unfortunately, we have the situation where about 500,000 tons of grain has been stolen by Russians on the partly occupied territories of Ukraine. We do know this because we have received the information from the people on the elevators that Russians came, just took this grain, came with military power. And also we have the video and photo effects of cars and rail cars bringing this grain towards the direction of Russia or occupied Crimea.
Elevators are, of course, storage facilities for grain. The minister also said he had seen satellite images of the grain leaving Crimea for other countries. CNN has also uncovered evidence of this. And secondly, Ukraine is stepping up the rhetoric. President Zelensky calling for Russia to be expelled from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, accusing Moscow of potentially causing the starvation of at least 400 million people. And thirdly, there are still fundamental disagreements about how to unravel this situation. Russia, which has blockaded Ukraine's ports, claims it's ready to open up grain shipments. But first it says Ukraine needs to demine the coastal waters around its southern ports. Ukraine says the real threat to world food security comes from Russia and is wary of any Russian talk of humanitarian maritime corridors. And meanwhile, time is not on their side. An estimated 20 million tons of grain are stuck in Ukrainian storage facilities. And the UN warned this Thursday that the situation could tip 47 million more people into acute hunger this year than previously estimated. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.
Russia's war in Ukraine is pummeling the global economy, and it's ordinary people who are feeling the heat. For the first time in more than a decade, the European Central Bank has said it plans to raise interest rates next month. It's hoping the quarter of a percentage point increase will pull Europe's inflation back from record highs. CNN's Barbie Nadeau travelled to a market in Italy where she now takes a look at how this financial strain is impacting one of Italy's staple dishes.
Signora, buonasera. Spaghetti al pomodoro.
Grazie.
Prego.
This is the quintessential Italian meal, spaghetti with tomato. But the price of this Italian staple has increased tremendously over the last year.
To understand why the cost to produce pasta from durum wheat and tomato sauce from fresh tomatoes has gone up, we went directly to the source. Here at the Maestri Pastai pasta factory in southern Italy, owner Valentina Castiello tells us the price of some of the raw materials to make her pasta have jumped by 100%. She tells us her company is trying to find ways to absorb the excess, but some of it will go to the consumer.
We have increased the price of our final product by 30%. The cost is high, but the consumer continues to buy the affordable products that everyone can use at home.
The average Italian eats around 50 pounds of pasta every year. Castiello says to confront the rising cost of living, distributors are actually buying more inventory from her factory. Because even if the price of pasta goes up, it is still by far the most affordable way for many Italians to put food on the table. The rising costs range from packaging to electricity to fuel to transport these goods. But it isn't just pasta makers struggling to produce economical food. At this tomato farm near Rome that Dalila Marasca owns with her father and brother, things aren't much easier. She tells us that fertilizer costs alone have risen 150% over last year. They had to make a drastic decision to reduce the number of tomatoes they planted by 40% because they have no idea what the market will be like when these new tomato plants are ready to harvest. Marasca says the tomato is the base of the Italian diet, during the summer as fresh produce and during the other seasons as canned products. The factors driving the prices of these fundamental Italian ingredients are complicated. First came the pandemic, then Russia's war in Ukraine, and now the uncertainty of what's next.
Barbie Nadeau, CNN, Rome.
The House committee that's been investigating the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol is going public tonight with a televised hearing. The panel plans to unveil what it's learned from more than 1,000 witnesses and some 140,000 documents. One committee Democrat says the panel will show that the riot at the Capitol was not spontaneous, but actually rather part of a deliberate conspiracy to overturn the 2020 presidential election and block Joe Biden from taking office. Here's how our Ryan Nobles explains it.
The committee believes, and they want to show, that many individuals came to the Capitol that day inspired by the former President Donald Trump because of his claims that the election was stolen. They came here with a specific purpose to cause chaos and violence.
Let's dig deeper into this now and what we can expect from the hearings tonight with Richard Painter. He was a White House ethics lawyer in the George W. Bush administration and is a co-author of American Nero, a history of the rule of law in America. Thank you so much for being with us. So obviously lawmakers here cannot indict Trump, but what is the goal, do you think, of these hearings?
Well, the goal, I hope, is to expose what happened and the very deep conspiracy involving many people supporting President Trump in his challenging the election of 2020 and the impact that conspiracy to subvert the United States government had on our democracy, not just on January 6th, but also the continued efforts in the last months of the Trump administration to pressure the Justice Department, even the military, to support President Trump in seizing power, and the effort to pressure the Vice President of the United States to throw the election to President Trump, even though Joe Biden had clearly won the election This was a serious threat to our democracy, a pattern of behavior over 2 months before January 6th, culminating in the insurrection at the Capitol.
How much will this move the needle in the court of public opinion, do you think, just given that most people have already made their mind up about Donald Trump?
Well, we need to decide if we want to live in a democracy or not, and it doesn't matter whether you are a staunch conservative who would like to see another Republican president, a staunch Democrat, or someone in between. The common value we share as Americans is commitment to a representative democracy. And we have had peaceful transitions of power in all instances, save two. In 1860, the Civil War erupted over the challenge to the election of Abraham Lincoln. And in 2020, the insurrection of the Capitol, which, while not as dangerous as what happened in the Civil War, certainly was a grave threat to a representative democracy. And together as Americans, we must stand firmly against such tactics if we want to preserve the representative democracy that our founders established in the Constitution.
So what can we expect tonight? I mean, this is airing on primetime television here in the United States. What can we expect tonight in terms of the type of evidence that's going to be presented by the committee?
Well, I hope the committee will focus not just on the events of January 6th and the fact that President Trump's speech incited the insurrection. That much is clear, and we've been over that again and again. What we need to focus on is what was happening behind the scenes. The meeting in the Oval Office, in which President Trump met with senior advisors in the White House and political supporters to contemplate sending the military into Pennsylvania and other states to redo the election. In essence, a military coup. The pressure on the Justice Department to render an opinion saying that the election was invalid, an opinion that then would have been taken over to the military to persuade the military to support President Trump in staying in power. This is how democracies turn into dictatorships. When we have a president or other leader in a representative democracy who will not leave office when the voters have told him his time is up. And this was a pattern of conduct through November, December, January, that was a grave threat to our democracy. I hope the committee will focus on all of it, not just the dramatic events of a single day.
Do you see the Justice Department going after former President Donald Trump?
I see the Justice Department looking into everybody, I hope. I'm not inside the Justice Department, so I can't see everything that's going on there. But I will assume the Justice Department is going to do its job, which is to prosecute everybody who committed crimes in connection with the attempt to overturn the election. That would include those who pressured United States government employees to engage in partisan political activity. It is a felony to coerce or order a U.S. government employee to engage in partisan activity, whether it's to win an election or to overturn an election. So when Donald Trump pressured the Justice Department to render that opinion, he committed a felony. That needs to be investigated, and if the evidence supports prosecution, he should be prosecuted for that.
All right, we'll wait and see how it all plays out on primetime television here in the United States tonight. Richard Painter, live for us, thank you so much. Still to come tonight, Ukraine's president says the fate of the entire Donbas region hinges on the fierce battle underway in Severodonetsk. We'll get a live update from Kyiv straight ahead. And a desperate search for safety, a controversial UK scheme to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda begins in a matter of days. All right, it looks as though President Joe Biden speaking now at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. Let's listen in.
Please have a seat. I've only been president about a year and a half, but every time I walk in the room, everybody stands up. I think there may be a fire or something. Press, that was a joke. That was a joke. Well, it's wonderful to be with you this morning. I really mean it. I want to thank the Chamber of Congress for bringing together this group of business leaders from all across the region. And all of us here in Los Angeles for a simple reason. Because we believe in the incredible economic potential of the Americas. I know I do, We all do. I mean, I just think the potential is unlimited. The region is filled with dynamic energy, entrepreneurs who are ready to break out, innovators who will change the way we think and the way we do things, young people poised to seize the future. Everybody, the press always asks me, why am I so optimistic with the way things are? Take a look at all these young folks. They're the best educated, they're the most generous, they're the people who have done the most, they're ready to volunteer, and they're the least prejudiced folks in the world. It's a new generation, and this an underpinning gives me an enormous sense of, and I mean this sincerely, an enormous sense of optimism. We have everything we need right here in the Western Hemisphere, not only to point ourselves toward a future that is more prosperous, secure, and democratic, but the ability to achieve it as well. And for all of you, are essential to making sure we get to this place we have to get to. You know, the private sector is able to move quickly, to mobilize vast amounts of investment capital that are going to be needed to unlock the enormous potential for growth in this hemisphere, in the region. And when we combine the ability of government to direct economic activity towards specific challenges, to help mitigate risk, guard against unfair practices, and create predictable demand, with the agility of the private sector, I believe we can deliver real improvement for people's lives. I really believe it. You know, just my wife often reminds me that I had a doctor who a long time ago who was saying when I had an aneurysm, he kept saying, is it congenital or is it environmental? And I said, I don't care. I just get it done. He said, you know what your problem is, Senator? I said, no. He said, you're a congenital optimist. But I am. I'm an American. That's why I'm a congenital optimist. So look, I really mean it. We can do anything. Jobs that pay good wages and respect workers' rights. Communities that come to life around investments. Families that can envision a future with an opportunity, just as my dad would say, just give them a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of breathing room. When that happens, everyone prospers, including all of you, all of you. But to achieve this, we've got to update our recipe, in my view, for economic growth. It's time to put a nail in the coffin, in my view, of trickle-down economics. It doesn't work. It keeps in an increasingly smaller and smaller world. It doesn't work. It keeps yielding the same results: greater inequity, slower growth, less competition, and less innovation. In the past few years, we've exposed the weakness of prioritizing short-term profits and working exclusively to maximize efficiency. We learned firsthand the pain that happens when just-in-time supply chains break down or hit a bottleneck. It's a fundamental difference. And you all felt it as well. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered a global economic crisis that we're still digging out of. And now Putin's brutal, unprovoked war in Ukraine has created economic disruptions that are affecting the entire globe. And that's not hyperbole. And these won't be the only shocks we're going to have to navigate. Climate change is increasing the pace and intensity of natural disasters. I leave from here on my way back east. I'm going to be stopping in New Mexico. They've had an incredible impact on their environment of late. Rising inequity and food insecurity around the world can fuel political instability. You all know that. And the question is not if we face another pandemic, it's when we face it, and are we going to be prepared this time? So the economy of the future will increasingly belong to those who place a premium on resilience and reliability, who invest in innovation over the long term and strengthen systems and supply chains now and mitigate the impact of future shocks before they hit. Each of us, the government and the private sector, have a critical role to play. That's why I'm focused on driving economic policies that grow our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Because quite frankly, when that works, everybody does well. And the wealthy do very, very well. No one gets hurt. No one gets hurt. For example, here in the United States, we're making a generational investment in our infrastructure. We used to be #1 in the world when I first came to the United States Congress. Now we're number 13 in the world. 13. I don't have to tell business people what that means in terms of economic growth. But we're fixing that. That's going to be the benefit to the entire region. We're investing $1.2 trillion bipartisanly to upgrade our infrastructure. to fix crumbling roads and bridges and ports, airports all across the country. That's going to help you get goods to market faster while creating good-paying union jobs. And I know a lot of you don't like my saying union, but union jobs to support working families, because that's what's happening. Everyone benefits. Everybody wins when that occurs. And the return on our investment is going to strengthen U.S. competitiveness throughout the 21st century. You know, this is the same approach we're taking across America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity. Many of the countries in our region qualify as middle-income countries. But that label doesn't remove the persistent structural challenges that run in deep inequity. Middle income means you don't get the benefit of a lot of opportunities. So we can change that. Help governments make life better, easier, and fairer for the peoples by using hemispheric multinational financial institutions to modernize and mobilize greater levels of private investment and create good-paying jobs. I know the real barriers for you to contend with. That's why we want to work with you to level the playing field. As I said last night, the United States is prepared to put new capital in the Inter-American Development Bank's private sector lending arm, the IDB Invest, to help catalyze the flow of private capital into the region, especially to support startups, digital connectivity, and renewable energy and health. For example, we need to make it easier for countries in Latin America and the Caribbean to develop their 5G infrastructure without having to choose between investing in their digital future or renewable energy structure. To be able to do both, we need to unlock the financing so both can be done at the same time. We want to make sure our closest neighbors have a real choice between the debt-trap development that has become more and more common in the region, and the high-quality, transparent approach to infrastructure and investment that delivers lasting gains for workers and their families. And by working through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation to lower the risk around these kinds of investments, support policy reforms, and improve investment and climate in countries. Excuse me, the climate of investment in these countries. And level the playing field. We're going to open up new areas of private sector investors that are not only economically viable, but are highly desirable. You know, over the course of this summit, the governments are coming together to make significant concrete commitments across a range of issues vital to achieving sustainable and equitable growth throughout the region. On bringing supply chains closer to home, on fostering innovation and developing a shared framework for our digital future, on kicking our action on climate change into high gear and speeding our clean energy transition, on bolstering health systems and food security in the Western Hemisphere, on managing safe and orderly migration as a shared responsibility through innovative and coordinated action to enforce our borders and stabilize migrant populations while seizing a shared opportunity for economic growth. My challenge to all of you is, if you step up and play a bigger role in driving inclusive, sustainable, equitable growth in the 21st century, a lot's going to happen. What more can you do to engage in these issues to shape our future? Not as a favor to me or to any government leader, but because it's your own overwhelming economic self-interest. If you make the investments necessary to build more secure and resilient supply chains, that's ultimately going to bring down your costs and make you more competitive and boost your bottom line. You're going to hear from John Kerry about the opportunities for private sector innovation and new markets that will be critical to reach our climate goals. Yesterday, Vice President Harris spoke about the $3.2 billion mobilized by our call to action efforts in Central America, including from several companies in this room, to bring quality economic opportunity to the region. We're expanding the 100,000 Strong in the Americas program to focus on opportunities for young people in climate and STEM fields, especially in the Caribbean and Central America. And I urge you to join us with matching funds, just as you did when we launched the program 10 years ago. There are many more examples, but let me close with this. We stand at an inflection point. I know you're tired of hearing me say this when I was running, and I continue to say it every day. We're at an inflection point. More is going to change in the next 10 years than has changed in the last 30 years in the world. Decisions we make today are going to have far-reaching impacts on our future. They're going to last well into the middle of this century. And business leaders, as you all see, where the trend lines are pointing as clearly as I do. And our challenge is to shape the outcomes so the future reflects democratic values of our region, an economy that we want to live and work in, and that ensures a fair playing field for our workers and our businesses. As we navigate this inflection point, leaders and business and those who come out ahead are going to be the people who are going to lead this change for the future, not those stuck looking backwards and sitting on the sidelines. None of us will be able to fully realize our ambition for the region on our own. So let's use this summit to tackle the obstacles to growth, come together around new ideas and new opportunities to take our region's biggest challenges on and defeat them. And for all of us to prosper. I really believe there is nothing we're unable to do, and I think we're primed. We're primed. And I'll close with this, what I'm going to say a little later at the general session. I find no reason why the Western Hemisphere, over the next 10 years, does not develop into the most democratic hemisphere in the world, most democratic region in the entire world. We have everything. We have the people, we have the resources, and we have more democracies in this hemisphere than any other hemisphere. So there's a lot we can do, but a lot of it matters on the private enterprise side of the equation. You all are the font of enormous ideas and opportunities. So I want to thank you all, and I look forward to working with you. And every time I'd walk out of my grandpa Finnegan's house, he'd say, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandmother would, "No, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith." Thank you. Appreciate it.
President Joe Biden there speaking at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, essentially rallying the private sector, rallying CEOs to come together to bolster the economies in the region. He emphasized that, look, trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's something that he said many, many times before. It does not work. That is not how you reduce inequality, especially not in this region. He emphasized that economic shocks will continue to face the region, be it food insecurity, political insecurity. There will be another pandemic, he said. The key is to be ready. He emphasized climate change as an ongoing threat as well. But he said that various companies can assist in terms of making sure that their companies are much more resilient and much more reliable in order to soften these economic shocks. President Joe Biden there just really emphasizing the role of the private sector in terms of shifting the economic landscape and leveling the playing field for ordinary workers. I want to turn now to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who is at the summit in Los Angeles. So, Priscilla, just walk us through what President Joe Biden said and what stood out to you in that speech.
Well, the overarching theme of this speech was really the, quote, economic potential of the Western Hemisphere. And to your point, he stressed private sector investment, something that we had already heard quite a bit about earlier in the week from Vice President Kamala Harris, who has a portfolio of addressing the root causes of migration, and as a result has been shoring up private sector support for the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But this goes broader than that, and that is what Biden was speaking to today. It is bolstering the economies of the entire Western Hemisphere and really sort of underlying the responsibility sharing among the hemisphere in reducing migration as well as tackling climate change. And he walked through some of that, including also supply chain resilience, combating climate change, which has been a theme of today, as well as food insecurity and addressing that. Now, all of this is very urgent because of the pandemic, which a lot of these countries were crippled by, but also the war in Ukraine, which is something that Biden also cited as having ripple effects across the world and in particular the Western Hemisphere. And I have heard that here too from foreign ministers. I spoke to the foreign minister of Honduras just yesterday, who told me that in a ministerial meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he mentioned and other ministers mentioned the effect that that war is having in their own countries on the energy sector and on agriculture. So Biden really coming here and really stressing the economic potential and saying that he is the ever optimist that hopes to see these countries advance in the next several years with the commitments that they're signing today.
All right, Priscilla, stand by. Let me bring in Patrick Ottman. So, Patrick, just sort of walk us through the sorts of economic issues that's plaguing Latin American countries right now and how the U.S. might assist.
Well, it's so interesting to hear him talk about the economy because that is hugely important coming out as we are just now of the pandemic. But of course, this some of the Americas has really been overshadowed by these long-held Cold War era political differences, and certainly while so many people are suffering, you had tremendous disparity in Latin America and the Caribbean before the pandemic. It's only gotten worse since. That's why we are seeing these historic levels in large part of migration. But I think this summit, despite the U.S. His best efforts, despite Joe Biden's best efforts, will be remembered for these long-held Cold War ideological differences. The fact that Cuba, where I am right now, Venezuela, Nicaragua, were not invited, and you had countries like Mexico, a long-standing ally of the United States, the president of Mexico, who was not in attendance, essentially is boycotting the summit, saying today that the delegation that he sent, his foreign minister, they're there only out of protest. And that really is remarkable to hear that during an event where so many countries should be coming together, should be forging a new economic path, that really you've had these issues, Latin American countries speaking up in a way that they have not done in the past, upset that countries that the U.S. considers to be dictatorships were not invited. So, while Joe Biden says that he thinks this region could become the most democratic region within several years, the reality is very different. What we are seeing on the ground, both on the left and the right, democracy is increasingly shaky here.
Right, Patrick Ottman, Priscilla Alvarez, live for us there. Thank you both so much. All right, still to come tonight, Ukraine's president says the fate of the entire Donbass region hinges on the fierce battle underway in Severodonetsk. We'll get a live update from Kyiv straight ahead, and a desperate search for safety. A controversial UK scheme to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda begins in a matter of days. We'll have a report from the Rwandan hostel that is preparing for their arrival just ahead.
Friday, new details on what happened inside the White House during the Capitol attack. The January 6 hearings. Live coverage starts Friday on CNN.
On culinary journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
Our mission here at CNN, the news comes first. You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts. It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here? How concerned are you about the front line? You don't believe that there's a racial divide here? Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think?
All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
I'm Matthew Chance in Kyiv, and this is CNN.
The UK is condemning death sentences for 3 foreign fighters in Ukraine, calling it a sham judgment with absolutely no legitimacy. According to Russian news agencies, a court in the pro-Russian self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic found 2 Britons and a Moroccan guilty of mercenary activities. Ukraine says it considers foreign volunteers to be members of its armed forces, thereby entitled to combatant protections under the Geneva Conventions. Russia is waging a fierce battle to capture Donetsk and labouring Luhansk on behalf of the separatists. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the fate of the entire Donbass could hinge on the battle for the city of Severodonetsk. Ukraine is massively outgunned there, but says it could turn the tide with long-range artillery from the west. CNN's Selma Delaziz is following these developments tonight from Kyiv. So, Selma, just in terms of the civilians who are trapped inside Severodonetsk right now, I understand that several thousand people remain, a lot of them elderly, roughly around 10,000. What are the options at this point for getting them out? Are there any?
Very few options, to be clear, Zain. About 10,000, as you said, civilians still trapped inside. What's important to remember here is that it's not just Severodonetsk that's being heavily shelled with Russian artillery. It is also the main access road that leads to that city. Ukrainian forces saying that if you use that main access road, there is an overwhelming chance that you will be struck by Russian artillery. That means it's extremely difficult to extract these families, to extract these people who are still trapped inside. And you have to remember that Ukrainian forces themselves appear to be now pinned down to so-called fortified positions. This is an area that, of course, has been fiercely fought over. President Zelensky says every inch of it has been fought over. You're looking at a Ukrainian force that is outmanned, that is outgunned. They say they are running low on artillery. And they have for weeks now been ground down by Russian forces. It's hard to imagine what could turn the tide here, Zain. And this is important. Why are we going on about this one city, Severodonetsk? This is important because it is essentially the last stronghold for Ukrainian forces in the Luhansk region. The larger goal here is, of course, Luhansk being part of the Donbass region. The larger goal here is for President Putin to take that region. Ukrainian officials say that there's been an uptick in this offensive in Severodonetsk in the recent days because there is that goal of trying to declare victory, a Russian victory in Severodonetsk by Sunday. That's Russia Day. That's an Independence Day. It could be a moment for President Putin, for Moscow to make a statement, to be able to claim the Luhansk region, to be able to claim the Donbass region. But I just want to pull up the map here for a second, Zain, because the reality on the ground is even if Severodonetsk has yet to fall to Russian forces, they're already solidifying those gains in the Donbass. They're already solidifying those gains all along the Eastern Front, because the goal here with this invasion was to create a land bridge from Russia through the Donbass into those southern regions, Mariupol, Kherson, those newly occupied regions, down to Crimea and down to those very crucial, very strategic warm water ports in the Black Sea. That is an important goal for economy, for trade, for security for Moscow, and they are making it happen by simply making that the reality on the ground. They are rebuilding infrastructure. That means there's hundreds of kilometers of railways now that are functioning, essentially allowing for the flow of traffic. Russian forces are already demining these ports in Berdansk, in Mariupol, reopening them to traffic, a crucial canal which provides fresh water to Crimea and Kherson. That's been reopened. So whether or not the international community recognizes this, Russia is carrying on with the facts on the ground of using this infrastructure as a land bridge, as its goal was to connect these warm water ports up into Russia. Zain?
Salma Abdelaziz live for there. Thank you so much. In just 5 days, the UK will start deporting asylum seekers that it says have come to Britain illegally. But they're not being returned to their home countries. They're being taken to Rwanda. The highly controversial government scheme sees the UK paying Rwanda about $150 million to house the migrants, while their applications for asylum are processed thousands of miles away in Britain. The move is intended to deter illegal entrance into the UK, but human rights groups say that it's unlawful, it's dangerous, and it is cruel. CNN's Larry Madowo is live for us in Rwanda's capital, Kigali. Larry, what's the view from where you are in Rwanda?
There are Rwandans who bristle at the thought of thousands of migrants coming here to one of Africa's most densely populated nations, and also the fact that these people get this kind of VIP treatment compared to the other 130,000 refugees that live in Rwanda has led to some disquiet within the refugee community here. But Rwanda says they will have full board accommodation and sports and entertainment, a chance to rebuild their lives, and they're ready to receive the first migrants next week. These are the final touches at Hope Hostel in Kigali before the first migrants deported from the UK arrive. And so this is the new place waiting for the migrants? Yeah. This building that until recently housed the young survivors of the Rwandan genocide has a new purpose. This newly renovated hostel can host up to 100 people, 2 to a room, and sharing communal bathrooms. So this is one sample room?
Yes, this is the one sample room for the first floor. Different amenities.
It's got towels, it's got an iron box, it's got a change of sheets.
Yes.
This is where the migrants will live under the watchful eye of Rwandan authorities. The hostel is functional, not luxurious, but the Rwandan government says the migrants will be free here, not in detention like in the UK. Vio Kigali. Officials are also promising healthcare and support for at least 5 years or until they're self-sufficient. But the plan has been widely criticized by many refugee rights groups in the UK, internationally, and here in Rwanda. The main opposition party here says Rwanda shouldn't have to bear the UK's burden.
It is their responsibility.
So you think the UK is violating its international obligations by passing that off to Rwanda?
Yes. And we don't see why. We are still struggling of having enough infrastructure. Electricity, water, roads, schools, hospitals. We are not the same like UK. We have to think twice.
Rwanda and the UK expect this migrant scheme to disrupt the business of people smugglers. But many international bodies, even the UK, rank Rwanda poorly on some human rights indicators. Critics also say accepting migrants rich countries don't want is cruel and inhumane.
It's cruel and it's inhumane that people are dying in the desert, trying to cross the desert, making these dangerous journeys, drowning in the Mediterranean. We're interested in protecting vulnerable people, and this has been our philosophy for the last 30 years.
We have fast processing.
Rwanda has also welcomed refugees and asylum seekers evacuated from Libya after unsuccessfully trying to cross to Europe. Orientation has started for the latest arrivals at the Gashora Emergency Transit Center. They're mostly from the Horn of Africa. How do you compare the conditions in the 4 years you spent in Libya and here in Rwanda?
Okay, it is so difficult to compare it because we can say from hell to heaven.
Being in Libya to Rwanda is like coming from hell to heaven.
Yeah.
Zemen is grateful for the peace and freedom in Rwanda, but it's still not his destination of choice. None of the people we spoke to here wanted to stay, even though it's one of the options. Your final goal is still to go to Europe?
Yeah.
Rwanda has become the global market leader in migrant offshoring. After the UK scheme, a deal with Denmark is in the works. It helps clean up Rwanda's image internationally, but some accuse it of trying to paint over a dark reputation. One of the biggest criticisms of this Rwanda-UK migrant deal is that these people are being forced to come here, 4,000 miles away from the UK, after they have risked so much to get there. It's illegal to do so, but Rwanda says there are no laws being broken by this. And even though a similar plan already failed, Israel used to send some migrants here until about 2017, 2018. Many of them left as soon as they could, and the Israeli Supreme Court came out against that decision. But Rwanda is very confident about this working out, and in fact, we expect an announcement about a similar deal with Denmark anytime now. Zain?
Right, so other countries are already following suit. All right, Larry Madowo, live for us. Thank you so much. Still to come tonight, the new Saudi-backed Live Golf tournament is drawing in the game's top players with huge payouts. How that may affect the future of the sport altogether. Next.
Heard it all before, but have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
Welcome back. Players taking part in the brand new Live Golf series are no longer welcome to participate in PGA Tour tournaments. Some of the world's top golfers teed off earlier near London in the Saudi-backed tour. PGA Tour officials said the players did not get the proper release to play in a conflicting tournament, so therefore they are now suspended. Several of the 17 golfers already gave up their membership to play in the controversial tour. Alex Thomas joins us live now from St. Albans. Alex, what's the latest and how significant are these suspensions?
Very significant, Zain. Hello, welcome back to the Centurion Club just outside London, the leafy green part of the English countryside that has become the centre of this furnace, this boiling pot of golf and sport geopolitics that we've seen unveil and unfurl here. The Live Golf series is up and running, but it's the controversy away from the course that's still the most compelling aspect of this. What was a simmering war of words boiling over and just revealing the naked acrimony at the top of the professional men's game, Zain. We talked about the shotgun starts here at the Centurion Club, all the players teeing off from different holes at the same time. And within minutes of them doing that, the PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan released a furious 9-paragraph, 2-page memo to the current members, the players that hadn't jumped ship for Saudi money. And he was deriding Live Golf and the rebel breakaway players, if you like. It was almost like a mafia movie style "you are dead to me" pose. And one of the lines from that memo read, I'm certain our fans and partners who are surely tired of all this talk of money, money and more money will continue to be entertained and compelled by the world-class competition you display each and every week. He was talking to his current PGA Tour players. The LIV Golf response was swift and frank. Today's announcement by the PGA Tour is vindictive, and it deepens the divide between the Tour and its members. This certainly is not the last word on this topic. The era of free agency is beginning. That's a hint at potential legal action. Phil Mickelson, who finished and refused to talk about the PGA Tour memo, said he previously this week he wants to retain the lifetime membership of the PGA Tour he has earned through his performances in 3 decades on that tour. Sergio Garcia, who quit the PGA Tour to play here, says he wishes everyone could go along. He doesn't want any legal action, and he won't have any as long as he doesn't try to play on the PGA Tour again. Another interesting side note is that Alan Shipnuck, the writer that Phil Mickelson spoke to, talking about how scary the Saudis were to deal with, he tried to get a question into Phil. He hasn't spoken since this all blew up in February, and he was ushered away by security despite having media credentials on.
Controversy aside, obviously everyone's focused on the suspension, but controversy aside, what's been happening in terms of the game today, and how big is the audience for this particular tournament?
It's hard to know how big the sort of global TV audience is. They haven't struck broadcast deals in every country, certainly not here in the UK. There was a flurry of last-minute broadcast deals to around 150 countries and territories. We heard the YouTube broadcast was up into the high hundreds of thousands at one stage, which isn't bad actually for a fledgling tournament. Hard to judge the crowds here. They refused to give us an exact figure, but it looked like around sort of 1,000–2,000 perhaps, the vast majority following the Phil Mickelson-Dustin Johnson group, unsurprisingly the 2 biggest stars here. You can probably hear the acrobatic display going on here. There's live music every night. They're trying to do something new and innovative, and actually the golf itself felt much like any other tour event. But as I said, it's this incredible controversy going on away from the course, which is really just throwing into turmoil a sport that for decades has been fairly stable and long established.
All right, Alex Thomas, live for us there. Thank you so much. And we'll have much more news after this quick break. Don't go away.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Art is an universal language that inspires people to make a difference and to think about the situation. It doesn't only touch their mind, it touches their soul. My name is Audrey Decker, and I am the co-founder of Street Art for Mankind. Today, there are 152 million children, 1 child out of 10, who is suffering from child labor. Street Art for Mankind is a non-profit organization that believe in art for social change. And that's what we do with big murals made by artists from all around the world. We started Street Art for Mankind around the fight against child labor and trafficking, and we have a series of murals in the financial district of New York, which are called the Freedom Murals. We also have a billboard campaign that we did, and that's called the Free Children Campaign. And this one we did with the street artists, but also with people who are really involved in the cause, such as Ashley Judd, Mira Sorvino, Kailash Satyarthi, Siddharth Kara, and also Nick Kristof. Our dream for Street Art for Mankind is really to create outdoor museums everywhere around the world to have this capacity to inspire people and create art.
Welcome to The Lead. We begin with breaking news. The United States has plunged into a recession. We're seeing infections at an all-time high. What's your reaction to that? Here are the facts.
The Lead with Jake Tapper.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
U.S. lawmakers are expected to vote next week on new security measures to protect Supreme Court justices and their families. The urgency to pass new protections comes after a man was arrested with guns and other weapons outside the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh on Wednesday. The man actually called police and turned himself in after arriving outside of Kavanaugh's home.
For Thornapple, the caller came to kill Supreme Court Justice Rex Kavanaugh. Came from California. He took a taxi from the airport to this location.
Security is tight across all of Washington as the Supreme Court is expected to hand down decisions soon on several high-profile cases, including a ruling on abortion in the United States.